Hello, my name is Joe Marion, and in today's screencast we are going to cover Rails facades. We have 5 topics that we want to cover today. We're going to go over the pros and cons of using facades. Then we're going to do just a quick review of what we're going to be building today. We'll talk about the facade implementation, and then at the end I'm going to do a live coding session where we will actually build up the app and then refactor it using the facade. Facades are just a technique that you can use to really help clean up your controller. Most pages generally do more than one thing, and oftentimes you'll find that you're passing more than one object to the view from the controller. As your Rails application's lifecycle progresses, this can really bloat out your controllers and lead to some really ugly code. Something that can be seen as a downside is that this is abstracting your code just a little bit more, but for a small price, it's going to lead to some really clean, concise controllers. So, what does a facade look like? Here we have a slightly exaggerated controller where we're passing 6 different objects to the view. Now, all 6 of these objects have something in common, and in today's screencast, we're actually going to go ahead and refactor these into a books facade. Now we'll go ahead and we'll look at what the books facade looks like here shortly, but refactoring it into one object will really go ahead and clean this up so that we can put in some clean and concise logic that really deserves to be within a controller. Before we go further, let's take a look at the 2-page application that we're going to be putting together in today's live coding session. The first page of our authors app is simply going to list out all the authors' names within our database and link to their profile. The second page is just going to be the author's profile page that lists out all the books that they have in 4 separate categories with a title and genre. So far we've gone over the pros and cons of using facades. We've discussed a little bit about what we're going to be building. Let's go ahead and actually look at what a facade looks like. The book facade is simply just a Ruby class that we're going to instantiate within the controller. For this example, we took all 6 of those objects that we saw earlier, and we're defining methods that are going to return those values. I'm going to go a little bit more in detail about how to actually implement this during the refactor stage of this screencast. Now that you have a general idea of what we're going to be doing today, let's go ahead and jump right in and we'll start to build the app, and then we'll go ahead and start refactoring to actually show you how to use the facade. And welcome back, guys. So far all we've done is generate a new Rails application, so all that's left is to run the bundle install command. After we get everything installed, let's go ahead and get started on building out our controller. So first we're going to generate our author controller and pass in a index and a show action. After we get the controller built, let's go ahead and first update our route file so that we'll be able to have access to those pages later. Once we have our route file set up, let's go ahead and work on our author model. And for the migration for the authors table, let's go ahead and pass it in a name. Now that we have the model and controller built out for the author, let's go ahead and get started on the books. First, we ended up generating a controller for the books, but I forgot that this is something that we're not going to use. So next, let's go ahead and work on the model and pass in a title, a genre, a published boolean, along with a fiction boolean. And then, last but not least, let's reference our author table. Since we went ahead and referenced our authors table within this model, or the generation command for the book, let's go ahead and open up our author model and associate this with or build up the association for the books table. Now all that's left to do is go ahead and create our database, and then we will run a migrate. Now, after our migration, I went ahead and put together a seed file that I'm going to go ahead and put in here so that we'll have some values already created. But all I did was just use Faker to be able to generate some authors and books with different values so that they'll be published, unpublished, or fiction or nonfiction. So let's go ahead and seed our database. And now that we have our database seeded, let's go ahead and get started on working on our authors controller. As you can see from the application that we talked about earlier, we're just going to have an index page that lists out the names of all of the authors. So we're just going to go ahead and take a variable called authors and pass in all of the authors. Now for our show page, this is where we're getting all of our information in our different categories. So without the facades, let's go ahead and pass in a author where we find them using the params. And then after the author, let's go ahead and get all of this author's books by using the association. And then for the first category, we have the published books. So let's assign a variable to the books where they are all published. Next category, we have unpublished. So we'll go ahead and get all of his unpublished books. And then for the last two categories, we have fiction and finally we have our nonfiction category. As you can see, this is a little verbose, but we did talk that this is a kind of an exaggerated controller where we wanted to be able to try and get our point across to be able to later on show you how we're going to turn this into a facade. I went ahead and already put together just a little bit of code for the index and show page. And so I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste these over. All right, now for the show page, you can see we're just using each of these variables that we set and just iterating through them to be able to pull information out. All right, so after we got the index and show page done, I went ahead and just pasted in some styles that I created earlier, so that it will look a lot nicer, or at least a little nicer. Let's go ahead and run our server and check it out. Let's see how it compares to the demo or the overview. All right, so here we have the profile where we are listing out the published, unpublished, and fiction and nonfiction. Not bad. It works exactly as expected. And you can see we're just looking, we're just going through, like I said earlier, we have all the different variables set up, and this is the controller that we have. It's like I said, it's a little bloated, and as you can imagine, once you start putting in some more of the logic, it can really start to get kind of dense. Let's go ahead and get started on how can we go ahead and refactor this to be able to incorporate facades. And so the first thing that we're going to want to do is create a new facade directory right within the app folder. And then because all of these variables that we're setting is all related to books, I went ahead and just named this the book facade, but feel free to see whatever you want within your category for your facade. I usually like to keep it what they're related with, and what these facades are is they're basically just Ruby classes. Here we're just going to be able to initialize it, and we're going to pass in the author so that we can use this instance variable throughout the class. And then another thing that we want to do is be able to pull in all the books that are associated with this author. Something that's useful is to be able to go ahead and just put an editor reader within here so that we'll be able to access the author himself. And then same thing with the books if we did later want to pull out a list of all the books. And all I'm going to do here is I'm going to take all the different commands that or all the different variables that we set in the controller, and I'm just going to go ahead and create them here within this class, so that when the method is called, it will return the same exact values. So here you can see I'm putting in a published method, a unpublished method, and these are essentially very, very similar to what we put within the controller. Some of the things that's really cool about this is that a lot of your private methods that you would have been putting at the bottom of your controller, you may have the opportunity to be able to put it within this code and reuse it in other places. And so not only does it clean up your one of your controllers, doing this can really dry up your code even more than you would imagine. Some other tricks while I'm typing this out. Some other tricks that I've used is I've used adder accessors for things like the author. Say if I would set the author as an accessor where I can actually write to him, so I could change through to different authors. To give you an example, what I would be able to do is I could iterate through all of the authors that are within the facade, and then set the author variable for every instance that's being ran through the class. This might be a little advanced, and I might decide to do a more advanced topic on facades, but I just wanted you to know that there are some really cool things that you can actually use these facades for. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go back to our author's controller, and we're going to get rid of all that clutter, and we're just going to make one instance variable called book facade, and we're going to create a new instance of our book facade and pass in the author. Let's go ahead and get back to the show page, and we'll go ahead and get started on refactoring down to be able to call on these methods. So here, instead of calling on the author, we're going to go ahead and call on the book. We're going to call on the book facade and call on the author method. And this is going to be the same throughout the application. I ended up calling the methods the exact same so that it's a little bit easier for me to refactor, but at the same time, these are just basic methods. You could have been able to call them whatever you wanted. Let me go ahead, and I'm just going to finish up these last two variables, and we'll go ahead and check our work and see how we did. Alright, now that we went ahead and updated our show page, let's go ahead and check it out and see how well it works. Oh, it looks like I have an error. Let me go ahead and check to see what the problem is. First, I went ahead and refreshed the server. Didn't really read through the error properly. I wanted to see if the facade got loaded in. And so now that our facade was started up with our server, let's go ahead and look for the typo that I made. Alright, looks like everything is good to go. As you can see, that wasn't that hard. This was something that I got from Sandi Metz's Rules for Developers. I would definitely suggest that you check those out. They have really helped me change the way I code. This is just one of the rules that she imposed on people. Some of the other ones include 5 lines per method and keep classes under 100 lines. Especially if you're new to the Rails community, I would definitely suggest checking those out. Thank you guys so much for checking out my screencast today. I had a blast learning how to do this. This was actually my very first one. I am really looking forward to producing more for the community. I'm always up for suggestions. You could just head to my website or send me an email. And I look forward to doing it for you. Thank you for watching.